Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of First Five Live. I'm your host, ChaosTheory, and I'm joined by my co-host, Phillycheaz, and by our first ever special guest, not the improbable German, not the 100% guaranteed German, the impossible one. My friend Jason.
Hi, everybody. That's a way more elaborate intro than I was told I was getting. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. I didn't have any like you didn't tell me what your wrestling music was, so
Okay,
I couldn't play it. But we would get like DMCA'd anyway, so.
got it. Yeah, it's actually these boots are made for walking.
Oh,
So
okay, good.
One.
yeah,
So, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the stream, Jason. Appreciate it.
yeah, no problem. Man, this has been such a good stream to listen into. I've really enjoyed the first two episodes, which that kind of brings me to the first thing I wanted to bring up. Guys, you have made it not just past your first episode. This is 3 that you've done. That's a major accomplishment.
Yeah.
in the
Actually
Ashes
a thing
community.
now.
It's
It
great.
is.
You've made it.
Yeah, I think 3 is when you can officially say that you have a podcast. The first 2 episodes, you're just doing something for fun a couple
Yeah.
times, and now it's serious. So I'm gonna kick things off with asking the viewers, does everything look and sound okay? Because we had a fun time trying to get the stream up and running. So please let me know in the chat if anything is weird. But we do have we will be watching chat regularly throughout. So if you have any questions or anything, be sure to post them there. But yeah, so today we have not a whole lot of news, but we have our main topic is going to be we're going to be talking about our top 5 conjurations. And spoiler alert, there are actually some hot takes in here. Our lists have some similarities and they have some big deviations, so it'll be a lot of fun to talk about. But first off, we got some news. We have a draft tournament that started. Phil, would you mind talking a little bit about that? I haven't paid as close attention to it, so.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun. We were separated into 3 pods and we did like a snake draft. So first person chose a card, going down, each person chose a card. At the end, the last person would choose 2 cards, and then it would go in reverse order choosing cards. And we had about 9 rounds of that. And then there was an open pool created of the remaining cards that weren't chosen in your pod.
Mhm.
And then there was also a like hate draft round, so just to stop anyone from getting a certain card.
Okay.
But with the shared pool of all the cards left, that really helps. So like you're not like stuck like, oh, I didn't get to choose this card. So that really helps like flesh out some decks where you're usually just stuck with what you have in draft. I've only played 1 game with the deck I have so far, but it's been a lot of fun. Just like out of your comfort zone, you're not playing all the good stuff, so it's fun seeing how the decks can still work.
Yeah. What did you build, Phil?
I ended up building. I went 2 routes with it because I got what did I start off with? I started off with the Cobra, thinking maybe I'd do Mill, but then I ended up also getting Jessa and Saria, so I could pivot either like if I wanted long burn or go with Saria for some Mill. So we'll see which way I go. Jessa
Nice.
first round, just got punished, didn't have enough units to put out. So might go Saria next just to have that Raven for more units and stuff.
Yep.
Sure.
Raven is really good in draft. I think we've seen Saria decks do well. I think in every draft tournament to this point, that's a Phoenix Born that kind of gets glossed over in regular play.
Mhm.
But in draft, man, having your Phoenix Born come with a really solid book when there's not a lot of those to go around, it just makes her stock go way up. So I think that Saria
Sure.
was a good backup pick for you.
Yeah. Guys, we already have some people are trying to call what our Pixar. So John in the chat saying, can we get some sort of side bet on whether Chaos Theory includes False Demon? And Nick followed up with, False Demon is an easy include for him. Yeah, there's some good guesses in here, guys. German will say turtle. I thought the same thing. We'll see if we're right. All right. Oh, and the new kanjis, the ones that have been spoiled, will not be a part of the discussion. Just so you know.
Yeah, we do plan on doing a new one every time we've gone through like a cycle after we've gotten to test them a bunch and like reorder our thoughts and see where those can fit in. But for right now, yeah, we don't have any of the spoiled cards on our list.
For sure. So other news, top cut of the AIL. I didn't make it. So once again, I'm gonna defer to Phil here to give some info.
Yeah, they did a top 12. The top 4 got buys, and then the others played into it. I made it to top 8, and then just got crushed by a Brennan. They're in the finals now are Inquisitor and Asterix.
And Asterix has been on Brennan quite a lot this tournament, correct?
Yeah, I actually took your list from the Shuffle Bus Invitational, and he brought his Brennan, and I was not prepared for that. And he actually started Beast Mage, and I didn't know what to respond to that. I drop a knight, and then he Seeds of Aggression it, and I'm like, okay, so that's cool.
Oh,
it was a rough start.
Wow, that's amazing though. That's such an interesting start that I don't know, like I wouldn't see that coming without open list. I just wouldn't even consider something like that.
Closed list, man. I'm telling you, like it's the Wild West.
Yep,
it's a different world. It's just felt easier doing open lists, but going back to closed, it's still like so much fun, but it's so much harder to know what you're up against.
My first closed list experience in this game in like any kind of like serious environment, not just like messing around on Ashteki, was that triple threat tournament, which was really cool. I hated that I had to drop it. But the very first round I played a Lulu 4 book that I had been feeling really, really good about. And I selected it first out of my 3 decks because I thought that it was the strongest one. And I forget who it was, but he had an Archosaurus out turn 2, and then he Chaos Grabbed it. He call to actioned it, and he just like I've got 4 books. I literally can't get a unit out, and I ended up taking 15 damage round 1, and then the rest of his deck was burned. And I was like, okay, so I no longer understand Ashes at all. So,
yeah, I remember hearing about that deck doing a ton of work.
Yeah, he ended up doing really, really well in that tournament because like nobody expects the Spanish Archosaurus. Like it's just it's just out of left field. It was great. It was so cool.
Yeah. Which side note for anyone who's interested in hearing our thoughts on open versus closed lists, last episode.
Oh, yeah. It was great.
The VOD is available on YouTube on my channel. You can check that out.
Yeah, that was a really great episode.
It was a lot of fun. I think we didn't even really scratch the surface of talking about it, but it was fun. Last news related item, we received a lot of spoilers. We actually got more since the notes that we wrote for this episode, but we're not going to cover them today. We're going to wait until the rest of the spoilers are out for the set, and then we'll probably do like a set review, or like I guess first impressions. It wouldn't be much of a review, but we'll probably try and have someone on for that. I would love to have a guest on. It would be really cool to get Nick on here talking about the design process on those. That'd be really fun. If you're listening, Nick, hit us up. You know where to get me. Okay. So with that out of the way, oh, you had guest questions here. Did you want to do them here?
Yeah, we'll do them here before we go in.
Okay, you wanna start that off?
I'm being questioned. That sounds intimidating.
Yeah.
I thought we'd have something fun, just some guest questions to ask you, for any people that don't know you, so you can talk about yourself, anything you do in the community. So for the first one, uh, what would you say like you're best known in the community for?
Uh, it's so I've written a lot,
Hmm.
and the articles are things that I've gotten a lot of good feedback on. And so like Jeremy's made a lot of video content, and now you guys are doing the stream. It's been really hard for me to squeeze in. Like Jeremy will tell you how much work these videos are, and I respect so much like just all the hours that goes into making like podcasts and streams happen. I'm just a little less flexible in my evenings. Sometimes I have a very small kid, and
For
so
sure.
I've kind of devoted most of my content creation to written articles. And specifically, since I started in with Ashes, I wanted to focus in a lot on the new player experience. And so if I'm known for something, I think it might be being like the new player guy. Like that's where most of my efforts have gone. Jeremy and I started First Five Fridays, and then with Dijon, we pivoted that into First Five League. That is really designed just to help new players get games and help veteran players get to just kind of blow off steam in a more relaxed environment. And then a lot of my articles have been focused around helping players get to grips with deck building or get a sense of like what cards are good in the meta. And probably the one that I've gotten the best feedback on is my adventuring party articles, which have been 2 of now. And that's where I kind of take a whole collection of cards and try to build as many competitive decks as I think I can get out of just one collection. So limited to 3 copies of each card. That limit to me is 6, which is kind of pushing it. But I do think that I've been able to semi-successfully do that twice now, and put out 2 sets of 6 decks that you can just build out of your collection, that are they function like real competitive Ashes decks do. I think you could go into like Shuffle Bus with them and at least not scrub out. You could take them into a constructed game and feel like you have most of the tools that you need to succeed. Like obviously there's limitations because it's technically a limited format. And part of the reason that I was so passionate about putting in the work to do that, is as much as I love Ashes, and seriously, this is just one of the most rich and rewarding card games that I've ever been a part of. This is a truly great game, but I have been very vocally critical of kind of the out of the box new player experience. I don't think that pre-con Ashes is a very good game. And in particular, I don't think that it's a game that communicates well what Ashes actually is and what Ashes at its best actually feels like.
Mhm.
I've been very critical of that in the past. I just don't think that the precons do a great job of that. And so the heart behind Adventuring Party and a lot of the other stuff that I put out is just to try to get players past that as fast as possible. Because once they're past it, this game is amazing. And I just kind of want to orient my efforts in the community towards getting people to the point where they can really engage with it the way that it has been so awesome for me, just as fast and as smooth as possible. So that's kind of where my heart's at in terms of what I'm doing in Ashes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there basically every day, every other day, I see people posting about your adventuring party list when people
Mhm.
ask about like, oh, where should I go with deck building? So it's
Yep.
yeah, your name, your lists are always coming up for that. So
For sure.
that's pretty cool to
It's
see.
been
And
really cool, yeah.
I
Um,
agree too. Like the pre-con like decks don't really like aren't in depth enough to like really get a feel for like what Ashes is because they're
yeah.
just pretty limited with what they have. So it's really nice
Yeah.
having that stepping stone.
Now, I hate to like take everything you just said and say you're wrong, but John pointed out in chat, meditating earthquake.
Oh,
So actually,
Yeah.
that's not what you're known for most. It's for meditating earthquake.
We should have
yeah.
asked that. Yeah.
We had it in the
Yeah.
We
notes to make a
we
joke
do
about
have that
that.
in the notes that I did put it in there because
But John beat us to it, which just proves.
the
Yeah.
the
One of
number of
my
games.
One of my favorite things was in Shovel Bus 5, I made top cut and then got matched with eventual champion Kaya immediately in case my luck wasn't apparent already. And I Shovel Bus is casting it, and my first turn comes, and I have to med exactly 2 cards round 1, and so I crank
What
off
were
2
they?
meds. They were both earthquakes, and I just kept playing and just took the rest of my turn real quick. And Jesse was like, "Wow, that didn't even phase him." And it's like, yeah, like at this point, it's just water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. And it's really funny in Ashteki when I'm just playing a random Xander game, and it will happen virtually every time. And whoever I'm playing with is like, "Hey," and I'm like, "Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
we know.
yeah, I know. Thanks. I'm glad you were able to be a part of this amazing experience that I love so
We
much.
have to
I
find the
cracked off
code.
2 Earth.
We have
It's
to
in the
find the
code.
code that Dijon put in there to be like, oh,
I know,
if
right?
you're playing, put the top 2
Yeah.
cards for Earthquake, and then you'll just meditate them off.
A couple days ago, I was playing Kaya, and I actually landed 2 Earthquakes in the same game, and I was like, "Is Xander good? What?
Yeah.
This is weird.
Wait, what?
This is crazy."
All right, question number 2, and we may have already answered this with this conversation, but who's your favorite Phoenix Morn?
Oh man, I love that big boy. Even though I can't stop meditating the EQs, man, there's just everything about Xander, from like his aesthetic to his flavor text, to like what he's able to do in a game. I don't know. Everybody has that one, right, that just calls out to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mine. I just love him so much, and I always like, it's like putting on your favorite pair of socks when I roll up a Xander deck. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel super comfy with it. But I will say that I have a close second, like slash tie, for that, and it's actually Auric. Which is kind of funny because when Auric got spoiled, the talk in the community was like, "Hey, German doesn't have to meditate his unique cards anymore. Like, Auric can draw him with insight." And like, yeah, it's pretty good for me. But man, and I think that you guys, I know you've both messed with him a little bit. We still just holistically as a community don't really know what a great Auric deck looks like, and I think most people think that the jury is out on whether he's ever going to be capable of like winning a major tournament or whatever. But what I will say is that the process of trying to figure that out has been so addictive for me. I love trying, like even when I get my face smashed in, like I just want to try over and over and over again. There's something about him that just keeps me coming back, and it's another Phoenix Born where I love the aesthetic and just the overall vibe, and I think that's part of what keeps me coming. But man, even though I'm not sure about him, I love that guy. I love Oric too. So those are definitely my 2 that I would say are my favorite.
Nice. Yeah. Good picks.
Yeah.
A couple other questions coming real quick that I may or may not have just added. But so how did you get into Ashes?
Oh, Jeremy. So I didn't play competitive card games at all, but Jeremy and I were in a band together about 1,000 years ago, and so we became friends then. And
Approximately 1,000. Yeah.
yeah, approximately 1,000 years ago, and we played all sorts of games and stuff together. Um, but he was the one who really got me into card games, and so he recommended Ashes to me, and then I got into Ashes 1.0. But I kind of expected it to function like other card games that I had played and have like a robust local community, and that just didn't happen. I got into it like right after the core set dropped, and of course there were those huge product delays with 1.0 that are very infamous now, and that meant that the box just kind of collected dust, even though I loved the game and the art style and I thought that it was good. I knew just sort of through osmosis that it had problems in high level competitive play with like lots of decks stalling out and things like that. And that didn't really sound like something that I was really optimistic about. And so I never pushed it. The lack of a local meta just meant it kind of collected dust. And then when it got rebooted, um, and I listened to that TC stream with Nick talking about the design directions for Ashes Reborn, and every single thing he was saying, I was just like, "Whoa! I think this guy is a great designer. Like, I think he really has a sense of what this game needs to be. And when I went into Ashes Reborn, and I've shared this anecdote a lot, but I just feel like it's important. I decided that the online community was going to be my Ashes community, and that I wanted to invest in it the way that I would a local community, which was a lot easier because this was right at the start of the pandemic and things like that. So all communities were online for a minute there, but that's how I got into it. I kind of dabbled with 1.0, and then it started collecting dust, and then I got back into it with 1.5, and very quickly, once I started getting games in, it just resonated with me and became my main game.
I'm a bad friend is how the short answer to all that. Like I'm addicted to card games, and I play like all of them. I try them all, and then I try to get Jason into them, and he's like, I'm not gonna play this game with you, and I'm like, but what if you did? And he's like, well, there goes hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. How long until you finally crack me on Flesh and Blood? How long? How long?
No, you gotta stay strong. Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Okay, we got one more. Other games you like to play besides Ashes?
I'm semi-retired from Marvel Champions. I really enjoyed deck building for that and publishing write-ups. That was a lot of fun. But then my main play partner moved halfway across the country, cough, cough, wheeze, wheeze. And I just didn't have a lot of those games happening in person anymore. And I really liked the in-person play experience. And so I ended up selling my collection, but I'll still do pickup games of it every now and again. And then the only other card game that I'm really playing competitively in any sort of fashion is I actually really like what Nisei is doing with Netrunner right now, and a few times a week I'll just hop on Jinteki and play a couple of pickup games of Netrunner. Ashes is amazing, but it's not my all-time favorite. I still have to give that to Netrunner. Netrunner in its heyday was so meaningful to me. I think a lot of people share that experience, and so I used to be good at Netrunner. I'm not anymore. I'm now hot garbage at Netrunner, and I get my butt handed to me all the time. But it's still really, really fun, and so I'm doing pickup games of that. And then in terms of other things that I'm spending free time on, I'm a musician, so I do a lot of like gigging around town, and then I love board games. I do that. I have a great D&D game going right now that I'm very thankful for. And most of my video game time is taken up by Final Fantasy 14, which you should never play because
it will
of
consume
reasons.
everything.
It will
You
consume your soul.
thought card games were bad.
Yeah, you thought card games were bad. Final Fantasy 14 will kill you. So love that game. So yeah, that's kind of where my free time goes nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm glad I never play video games too much. I can never just like keep with playing it because I don't have enough time. So I like buy one, play like a couple hours, and then just like stop forever. It's like, oh, that was not a good use of that money, so I just don't do that much.
Yeah, you're too busy going undefeated in Swiss to play video games. We get it.
Right.
We get it.
Not this season, but don't ask me about my record.
You couldn't go undefeated with Fiona? What a garbage player you are.
Yeah. Now we know that Aerodel was the sauce.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, Aerodel, not me.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me yap a little bit, guys. That was good. It's fun to be the first guest that you guys have had on the show. It's really cool that you guys are making this content. I think this is just a great cast, and it's totally an honor to be on it. So thanks for asking me some questions.
For sure, man. We're glad to have you.
Thanks.
All right, let's get to the main event where we spew hot takes around and argue with each other about
hot takes.
About the difference between top 5 and top 7 is what we're all right, so top 5 Conjurations. The way we're gonna do this is just as a forewarning, because the first round is gonna end up being all this, but if we come across a card that shows up in someone else's list at a higher placement, then we're gonna wait to really talk about that card until we get to the highest one. That way we're not kind of reiterating the same points over and over again, and hopefully that'll save everyone some time, and we could spend quite a long time talking about these 15 cards or 15
and we probably
slots.
will anyway.
We probably will anyway. So do we want to like go in any particular order, like a person, or does it matter?
I guess we can just go in the order we have
on the notes.
Yeah, from left to right is
left
fine,
to right.
I think.
Okay. All right. So
middle, left, right.
Yeah. So we'll start with Phil, and we're gonna do our number 5. We'll do honorable mentions at the end. I think that'll be fun. But number 5, Phil, what's your number 5 top 5 conjurations?
So for me, I had Three-Eyed Owl as number 5, which is higher on Jason's list.
Somebody's
So
list, yeah. Somebody
somebody's,
ranked that
I'm
higher.
so
Yeah.
Maintain the mystery, Phil.
Yeah.
you're
Well,
right.
that's
You're right. I failed
interesting
there.
too, is because, yeah, it'll be a while before we talk about Three-Eyed Owl. I'll just say that.
Will, yeah.
Might be next round.
Yeah. I'm personally kind of surprised at the where it's placed on your list, so that'll be fun to talk about later. Okay, my number 5, which I'm sure is going to also be quite a surprise. This is definitely kicking things off with hot takes right away. I put Frostback Bear as my number 5.
At least it's on your list.
It is on the list.
True.
So we know you're not crazy. That's good.
You're not too much down the jank rabbit hole.
No.
We'll get there. We'll get there, Phil.
Yeah. It's on the list. It'll be fun to talk about why it's as low as it is in just a little bit.
Higher. It is higher elsewhere.
Jason, what's your number 5?
My number 5, and this is another card that will get talked about later. It is ranked higher on somebody else's list, but my number 5 is actually my favorite conjuration. It's Salamander Monk. And we have lots to say about him that we will get to in a little while, because I have him ranked actually lowest out of everybody.
Yeah. This might be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but you're insane for putting that at 5.
I'll take it. Actually,
with him saying that, I'm kind of scared for what my next one.
Yeah, Phil, what is your number 4? Moving right on the list. What's your so you have Three-Eyed Owl at 5, and then number 4 you have.
It might be Salamander Monk.
You guys are both insane.
So
I say right before we get to my number 4, real quick before we keep going. John says, I'm sitting here trying to think of 4 conjurations that are better than Frostback Bear.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you know what? Stay tuned, buddy.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
My number 4.
There's not many.
Yeah, there's not. No, there's max 4.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip over Jeremy's card real quick, because Jeremy's card is the first card that we're going to actually dive into. My number 4 is Lightbringer, which is on another list higher. So we're gonna come back to Lightbringer in a little bit. I've got it right above Salamander Monk at number 4, which brings us to the. I know. I actually that would like that's the one where I'm like, I have that ranked too low. I couldn't do it. So. Jeremy, tell us about your number 4 ranked conjuration.
Okay.
Before you do, you were calling us insane, right?
Yeah. I was calling you guys insane, right?
Okay.
Right. Sure. Go ahead. And then
I wish that Carl was here in the chat. If Carl was here, he would have my back on this one. So my number 4 is Indiglo Creeper. I think. And so just for reference, because we didn't really talk much about the 5 picks, I put it above Frostback Bear. So Indiglo Creeper, the reason why I think this card is one of the best conjurations in the game, and even put it above Frostback Bear, is because it is an insane value engine. Like there's no other card in Ashes that gives you 3 bodies for 1 summon. And for those 2 dice that you spend, if you can keep the engine going, if you can actually keep the investments going on your Indiglo Creepers, there's literally nothing that competes with it for value. It is insane. You get a 2/1. So for 2 dice, you get a 2/1. Once the book's focused, you get a token. It dies. You get a 0/2 that becomes very quickly an 0/3 or 4 that can't die. Essentially, it just starts like, once it gets health, if you don't kill it fast, it just becomes unkillable. So, and it can block, and then you kill it and you get 6/4 in stats across 2 bodies. Now, of course, they're fading. They don't stay. But there's just 4 bodies. Sorry, Casey. Yeah, you were correct.
Yeah.
4 bodies for 2 dice. Now, granted, you do have to build your deck around it. You have to support it. You have to nurture and raise your Pokemon. But in my opinion, like, even though, you know, there's a lot of arguments for whether or not Creeper is easily disrupted and how you play against it. Personally, I've literally never won against Creepers. Maybe that's part of the reason why it's maybe that informs my placement a little bit. But I just can't think of any Conjuration that has the ceiling that Creepers does, and the floor I think is a lot lower than people think it is. So
Yeah, I do agree. Like once that engine gets going, it's just like insane and like really hard to combat there.
yeah,
And like when I did see it on your list originally, I was like, okay, that is shocking, but it's not like I can't contest it too
Not
much
crazy.
because yeah, it's like it is great value. Even if you like don't build around it, it's 2 dice for a 2/1 and then an O2 body. So it's 2
Yeah.
bodies with like durable stats there. Um,
John
So
John said in the chat, "I wish you had a Patreon so I could cancel my subscription after hearing that Creepers is better than Frostback Bear."
John, buddy, you're good. You can unsubscribe from his YouTube channel. There are
Yeah.
ways to express your anger.
Yeah.
You're good, bro. You got it.
That's hilarious.
So I'm looking through the list of ready spells on Ashes.live right now.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to come up with a card that defines a card on this list of ready spells that defines a given game of Ashes more than summon Indiglo Creeper. And
Mhm.
other than maybe Hypnotize, which is going to majorly change how you have to play out the game, or Lightbringer, which obviously can control a large portion of what you do. I don't know if another card on this ready spell list demands specific responses as much as Creeper does.
Yeah.
Because you're
or like
right.
how you're
I
going
mean,
to play the game.
right, like because it's just like Phil said. I mean, you just can't let that seed sit.
Mhm.
It's too much value to allow it to happen, and then that's not to say that there aren't options for dealing with it. There very much are, but you, it's kind of like Owl in that you can't just let it sit there. Like
Yeah.
that there is no winning strategy that involves just letting them go.
It and
And
that
we talk a lot about Salamander Monk being such good value,
mhm.
and for 1 die, you're getting a 1/1 and a 1/1 that can't block.
Mhm.
You spend 1 more die with Creeper, and you're guaranteed to get a 2/1 and an O2, both of which can block. The O2 gets scaling health, and if it's left alone, you might get 2/2/3s. And so,
3 twos.
you know,
3 twos.
3/2s, excuse
Yeah.
me. Yeah. I think just in terms of pure math for what those 2 dice are buying you,
Mhm.
yeah, Creeper can be disrupted, and yeah, Meteor like eats its lunch. But raw math for what you're getting for those 2 dice, Creeper's
It's
Creeper's
insane.
incredible.
Yeah,
Like,
and
yeah,
it like I like that you guys pointed out how you have to warp your entire play around it. You cannot play Ashes the same way against a Creeper deck that you play against other decks.
yeah,
Um
for sure.
and yeah, so that's why I placed it where it is. I do think, and I want to say this real quick before we move on. I think that there is potentially part of the reason why it's underrated by most of the community is that right now, when you see creepers come down, you know it's a deck that's built all around creepers and like getting them to work. But I think in the near future, with what we've seen, like kind of the trajectory of the time cycle with like status token generation and so on, I think there's a real possibility that in the future, Indigo Creeper could be a support piece as part of a cast instead of like the main event. And all you need really for that to work is to have like a critical mass of threats where you can't just deal with the creeper. You have to deal with this, 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 and this.
Mhm.
And once that can just be left alone, like any moment where it has to be left alone is a moment where it can go crazy in value. So I don't think you have to build like a giant a deck around it necessarily. But
I have been seeing it in the wild lately. Shadowfire has been running a very interesting creeper out of Brennan, which you wouldn't think works with a 5
oh,
battlefield. But one thing Carl has said about Creeper is that self sack is one of the most important pieces of that engine, just
yeah.
because you have to keep the chain rolling. And there's Brennan with self sack with upside right on our Phoenixborn card, so
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense. And then I've
Which
also been seeing more Lulu Creeper, and again, that's a
mhm,
6 battlefield, so it's still tight. But she does have status token synergy, and she does have 4 book slots. And so I think that she is getting close to that area where Creeper is more of a part of an ensemble instead of the whole focus of the deck.
yeah.
So
And
and I
Shadowfire
agree with
is in
you.
chat, by the way. He says
Oh, that's cool.
still working on that deck.
I
Yeah.
have played Brennan with creepers before too, and it is a ton of fun because
Mhm.
I feel like that, like you said, self sack is like really hard to like it's gotta be something that you make work there. Like usually it's with Guilt Link with Koji,
Yeah.
Right.
but like to have that
Which
on
is
demand to be like,
insane.
okay, I'll
Yeah.
just blow up the creeper to start the seedling progression is really
Right.
Mhm.
helpful.
KC asking, how do you trade with Creeper even on dice if you aren't Odette? The answer is you kind of don't. Like,
Yeah.
you just have
Yeah.
to, like, you can't really go even against it. And that's one of the reasons I think it's good too. The way you beat creepers generally is you have to stop it at the right moment. And usually that means that you're expending more resources than your opponent is, but if you can shut them down and stop the engine from running, usually that's how you win. Um,
Yeah. Takes them too long to get back set up back again.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's harder
But
than
it's
it
like
sounds.
sure, but it's like right now, okay, I put a master vampire down and I just go eat the seedling and heal a health, right? Great.
hmm
Fine. Like you're winning on that trade every time. But I think you're right, Jeremy. Where creeper is going to start to come up in the meta is when you're having to choose between sending your master vampire at creeper or this other thing. And that's where it's going to start to
Yeah.
get to a point where it's different. And as we get more time stuff and just more status tokens flying around everywhere, I think that that's totally possible.
John says Jessa. That's a really good answer. Fear does answer the
Ugh.
creepers pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, let's before we spend all our time talking about creeper, let's move on to our
Well,
number
there's a
3
hot take.
picks.
So
So number 3 picks. Phil, what's
sure.
your number 3?
It is Ruby Cobra.
What a coincidence. That's also my number 3. We
Hmm.
actually agreed on something.
You did it.
That.
Jason, what's
My
Cobra
number
on your list?
three. My number three is not Cobra. It would have been cool if it was. My number three is Gilder, which we're not going to talk about now because somebody else has it higher.
Yeah.
But that's not the case with Ruby Cobra.
Yep.
Ruby Cobra at number 3 is the highest placement that you have it, which does in fact mean that it is not on my list, and you guys can wreck me now. So tell me
I'll tell you
about
crazy for
why.
that.
Tell me about why you guys have it at number 3 when it's not on my list at all.
So, I played it a lot in the last Shuffle Bus season and even right now, and it feels like even better than Owl for me because for Owl it takes one card each round. Cobra can effectively it takes a card each round too, but then it also has that damage behind it too. So it in a sense like effectively doubles the amount that it's going to get out of you.
Mm,
Because at the end, when you start taking fatigue damage from Owl taking out cards, Cobra's getting there in that effect, and then also doing the damage with it.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
its downside is you don't really want it as a defender, where you're fine with that with Owl. Um, when you don't want to discard cards, you really want to be attacking with that Cobra, so you have to play it at the right time so that they're not going to be swinging at the Cobra and then taking your guard early or just removing it. Um, but it's a just a really solid unit for just one die.
hmm
Yeah. That's really what it comes down to for me is that it's a very high value unit for one die. As in terms of you're getting essentially, because you never really defend with it, not unless you have to. You're getting a 1/2 conjuration for 1 die, which is really that's really good value.
Yeah.
Like Salamander's more value because you get 2 1/1s, but it's split up across 2 units. It's a little bit easier to pick apart Salamanders, and the spirit doesn't block. So like the fact that Ruby Cobra is so hard to kill, it's almost guaranteed to get its swing in. You don't really care what you're swinging at. It's always going to be
No.
good. Like
Yeah.
you
No,
swing
not
at
at
face,
all.
you swing at a unit, you swing at a knight, it doesn't matter. It's got that kind of guard pressure thing that Salamander does too.
It does.
Where it's like it's really annoying to like let it hit a bigger unit because it turns on Fester and stuff like that. But you don't really want to PB block a 1 attack unit, especially when it's already getting its value from the discard. And like what Phil was saying too, like when you consider the long game, which I think you have to with Ruby Cobra because they're so
do.
efficient at milling. When you consider the long game, Ruby Cobra's doing 2 damage every time it hits. So
Yeah.
it's essentially a 2/2 for 1, which is really, really good. And it's in Charm, which historically has a problem with being proactive. It's the only really proactive Charm unit, besides Three-Eyed Owl in a way, but it doesn't actually. Three-Eyed Owl doesn't directly contribute to the win condition in the same way that Ruby Cobra does. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's splashable, which it's everywhere. You can put it in literally anything. So yeah.
I have a few thoughts on Cobra. So in the first draft season, I believe it was the third, where Cobra was available. I had a fairly early pick, and I wanted to be in Charm because nobody was in it yet. And I had a choice at that point between Cobra and Three-Eyed Owl, and I took Cobra. And I specifically took it because, as you said, it's the more proactive unit. And that was something that I valued in draft. And I think it's something that has just generic value as well. Obviously, I think Phil really made a splash with this unit out of Aradel. And the way that, one of the reasons I love Leo so much is it's like, hey, here's your secondary win condition. Like, you just kind of get it. And Ruby Cobra did so much work by itself that Phil was able to take it and use it to make his Aradel deck a mill deck almost on its own. Like there were some EVs and stuff in there, and some return to soils that he shouldn't have had in the deck. But he's got a mill deck now just because Cobra is that good.
Yeah.
It's an amazing conjuration, and
Yeah.
it really should be on my list. It's just I couldn't justify it.
Right.
It's still
Fair.
good.
John in chat asking between Cobra and Three-Eyed Owl, which one has a bigger impact on the first 5? Three-Eyed Owl, hands down.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the spot where Owl has it over Cobra because it can just really warp your first 5s there. Like Cobra affects the long game, helps you accelerate and get there faster, but Owl really takes the cake for first round.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. So yeah, you had Jason, you had Gilder as your 3,
Okay.
which is going to come up later. Let's go ahead and move on to 2s, and from here on, guys, we're talking about all of them because we've hit some of these before. So, Phil,
Got there.
what is? I should say Phil and Jason. What is your number
Yep.
2?
We both have Frostback Bear.
Yeah, you do.
Which means that nobody ranked the bear as their number 1, which is surely going to ruffle some feathers out there.
It's gonna ruffle
That was
John's
my
feathers.
fault.
It's gonna ruffle John's. Yeah, John's already
Gonna
unsubscribed from your
unsubscribe again.
YouTube.
He's
Yeah,
he's
I don't
subscribing
really
just so he can
subscribe and
unsubscribe again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm
Um,
blocking you on Discord.
Yeah. So, Frostback Bear, here's the thing. I've had games where I play a bunch of high threat stuff, like stuff that my opponent has to answer, and they choose to remove the Hammer Knight or they choose to remove the Sonic Swordsman or whatever, and they're spending their removal on that
because it has to die. And because they're spending their removal on that, a lot of times the 2 bears, that's the conjuration limit, and I get 2 of them out, and then they just kind of get to live because the other threats are taking the hard removal attention. And a lot of times I still win those games off the back of the bears, and basically the bears alone, because if they're not dealt with and you're not able to consistently block them, there is no other ready spell in the game that puts as consistent of a swing threat on the board as efficiently as this book does.
Mm-hmm.
I've said before, and I hold to this: if you're going to swing at all with your deck, you need a good reason to not have Frostback Bear on your spell board, because it
Mm-hmm.
is the premier conjuration for putting a threat onto the board that must be dealt with
Yep.
in a dice efficient way. And so I think it speaks a lot that as long as my bears live, I can win on swing. And then the bypass has a lot of elements to it as well, but it's that consistent, steady threat. And moreover, this has been touched on a lot too, but I think Ashes is a better game because Frostback Bear exists. And I don't think that it's a problematic unit. I think it's just a game defining unit, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. Like, we talk about like value with units too, and the 2/3 stat line for 2 dice effectively after round 1 is just like there's nothing else that really compares to that. So you get that body, and it is effectively only like a burn unit basically, because when you attack with it, you're going for that bypass just to chip in that 2 damage. But
Mm-hmm.
even just going for that burn, it can just slowly like stack up really quickly. You get 2 bears out, and then they just keep going, and it's really hard to trade um, up on them because they can that 3 health there for 2 dice is just straight value with that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree with what both of you guys are saying. Bear is the king of swing. Like if you're gonna play a swing deck, I think you have to consider Bear, and I think you probably end up playing Bear.
Yeah.
There's very few decks I would classify as like a traditional swing win condition deck that doesn't include Bear. My Herald doesn't, but I would say my Herald is more of a swarm deck. It kind of leans that direction anyway. But Herald's kind of a weird case because it's a gates to an open thing and it's much more tempo oriented. If you're just going
you're
for
just trying
like
to overwhelm them.
exactly. So if you're just going for like I want to swing at my opponent and kill them with units swinging, it's really hard to argue against Bear at all. The reason I have it so low,
Yes, do tell.
okay, so for reference, we're on round 2. I'll get to my round 2 pick in here in a minute. But like I have Indiglo Creeper and Ruby Cobra above Bear here. Here's the reason why, and you'll see this with all of my other picks. Frostback Bear is the most expensive conjuration in my list. It's pretty narrowly focused. It's not very flexible. Either on dice, because you have to run 2 nature to play it in your first 5. You're usually committing to nature a bit. And normally, that's not a problem. Nature's really good. But it does kind of inform your deck building direction. And some decks can't really afford to play Frostback Bear. You have to like lean into it a little bit. But I think it's expensive. The first Bear is just okay. Like 3 dice
Yeah.
for a 2/3, even with the terrifying ability, it's just okay. It's kind of a weak-ish knight at that point. But again, you do get that increased value every single round after that. But yeah. So I think the reason I list it so low is compared to the other Conjurations in my list. It's the least flexible besides Indigo Creeper, which the reason I put that above is just the ceiling is so high. It's just it's ridiculous. But compared to my other picks on my list, it's less flexible. It kind of pigeonholes you into one style of deck, one color, that you have to like focus on a lot. And in the beginning of the game, it's not as impactful. Or rather,
Because it's expensive. Yeah.
it's just expensive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's without a doubt it's in my top 5 for a reason, and it's an incredible unit, and it enables an entire archetype of like the kind of 4 books / swing decks. Like it is the backbone of so many decks. But I have to dock some points personally. I have to dock some points because I think I value flexibility, affordability, splashability, and such, and utility higher. And I think utility is another one where Bear kind of lacks a little bit. It swings, it hits face, it's hard to kill.
That's what it does.
It doesn't
Yeah.
control. It doesn't control your opponent very well. It doesn't fight for the board as well. It just sits there. It tanks damage and it hits face. So
Yeah, in fact, it kind of asks the player to do more control than they normally would, because the ideal lines with Bear involve trying to just consistently keep them off of anything with higher than a 1 attack so that the Bears can get through.
Yeah.
It is asking a lot of the player, not just in terms of removal and lines of play, but like, I mean, y'all, it's hard to first 5 Bear sometimes. I have lots of decks where my first 5 is kind of inflexible because I've got to get Bear Book down. I've got to have 2 nature to do it, and I can't not summon Bear. I lost a game of Shuffle Bus this season because I had to start Bear, and I ended up so on the back foot against this really aggressive Bryn and Burn deck that I actually had to pivot off of Bear completely, just to try to get control of the board back by fighting with small guys.
Yeah.
And I was forced to do that, but I also, there's no way that you leave Bear out of the first 5 when it's the cornerstone of your swing.
Right.
And so, I had to have it in my first 5, but then as the round played out, that 3 dice expenditure just didn't make sense for the position that I was in. So I think that's really illustrative of some of the criticisms that you're offering, Jeremy, for sure.
Yeah, I
John-
definitely like a lot of the points you make too, because it's very narrow. Like I said, it's basically just a burn spell that you get down there. They have to just deal with. It doesn't
a good
guard
way to put
pressure or
it, yeah.
anything. It just goes in trying to burn you.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are a lot of decks where it's just like you get swarmed and you can't get your units through because they'll just block with everything back and then just refills. So that's why I really feel like Bear is just necessary in those circumstances, so you can get that damage in
Yeah.
over the top where they can't get it.
Yeah,
And
and like,
maybe I'm seeing it as a crutch. I don't know, just so I can have that there. But yeah, I've just had that so many times where it's like,
there's way
oh, I
worse
can't get through.
crutches.
I wouldn't be able to get through without Bear.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, like in a game that is already so built on efficiently, if Bear doesn't exist, don't 1/1s just own Ashes outright? I mean,
Yeah. I do think it's a necessary piece of the Ashes pie right now. Like, because Bear gets past those units, it pushes through clogged board states, but it also dies to knights, which is, I think right now Bear is like one of the, if not the number 1 unit that informs whether or not 3-cost allies get played in a lot of respects. And so like it's definitely there. It's definitely a super key important piece of Ashes. But for me, I just had to dock some points because of its inflexibility, its narrow focus, and its expensive nature. John says, yeah, nature cards are pretty bad.
They are. Oh, man.
But anyway, I think that's a fairly hot take. Now, my number 2, I put Salamander Monk as my number 2. And I rated it higher than anyone else, which I think is crazy. I think it's so crazy.
All 3 of us have it.
All 3 of you guys have it. Now, should I go first, or should you guys talk about where you put it first? I don't know. You tell me.
I'll talk about it first. I ranked it lowest. I ranked it 5th.
Yeah.
I love Salamander Monk. It's my favorite conjuration. I feel like I crutch on it and Lightbringer a ton. I want to share just a short anecdote. I ranked everything else higher primarily because I don't think Salamander Monk wins you games on its own. Whereas all the other units that I have on my list, I would say can be, in terms of what they're bringing to the table, game deciding. I haven't seen Salamander Monk do that as much. There's definitely games where it way outvalues what you paid for it. That's kind of its whole thing. But I don't think it wins on its own. In the latest draft season, I took Salamander Monk first, and I realized pretty quickly, like, hey, I just spent my first round draft pick on just a cascading 1-1, and I was really in a pickle thinking, like, how do I actually convert that into something that can win a game of Ashes? And I found a way. I got like Jessa and Sacrifice Tech and Vampire Bats and things to kind of like do the self sack thing. But it didn't anchor my spell board the way that I think some of these other units can. And I say that saying that it's a great unit. But the reason that I've ranked it low is that at the end of the day, as good as it is, it's won once. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I ranked it 4 because it was just tough. Like I had effectively my top 6 that I wanted. I was just moving everything around back and forth, and I was like, well, I to me, I felt just after the success I had with Cobra's higher, Bear has to be higher. My number 1 pick had to be higher than it. Um, so that's just where it ended up, and it it's on my list because it's still a really great card. Because it can guard pressure really well. It gives you 2 units with that too, so it can stall out main actions as well. Um, the
Mm-hmm.
only thing I can really say against it is just the spirit coming back, just that it can't block. So
yeah.
like
Mm.
you can use the Salamander Monk to block instead of attacking, so that you can get the spirit out and then you can pressure with the spirit. Um, there's lots of ways to work with that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Jeremy, let
Assuming
me
you want to go into more.
let me start your Salamander Monk Bible with a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is Salamander Monk the best guard pressure unit in Ashes?
I was actually just about to bring that up because I think it is. I think it's. I really don't think there are any other units in the game that really can compete, because you get essentially 2 guard pressure out of it. You get to do it twice.
Perfect. One freaking die. Yep.
And yeah, it's 1 die, and it's in it. So okay, so for me, there's the value discussion. It's 2/2 of stats for 1 die. We just got done talking about Ruby Cobra and how like that's one of the key things with it is like it provides that kind of value turn after turn, and I think that's key here too. It's 2/2 for 1 die, which is huge. Just huge value, and it's guaranteed that value too. Ruby Cobra's not quite guaranteed that, because you don't know if you're going to get to the late game or not. You may not. That fatigue damage may not matter. It works on defense and on offense. It's a good blocker, and then it turns into an offensive attacker as well. Great surgical striker against like swarm decks or 2/1s that are typically can be problematic or deal a lot of damage turn after turn. They're so easy to take out with Salamander Monk. But I think there are 2 big things for me. There's one major huge thing for me that pushes it over the top, and then a side benefit that I think people overlook. The first one is it buys you so many main actions, and I think Ashes is it's a very reactionary game in a lot of ways. You are trying to outposition and outmaneuver your opponent, and one of the big ways you can do that, and inversely, one of the ways you can really, really fall behind is by doing too much early. You commit too many of your resources. Your opponent knows the best ways to deal with those problems, and they can assign their resources in the right places. And I think Salamander, it's the main to play the book, the main to summon it, the main to attack with the actual monk, and then the main to attack with the spirit. 4 main actions for 1 die and 1 card. Is just enormous. And then after round 1, you don't even pay the card. It's just on your spell board. It's an extension of your hand. It's 1 die for 4 main actions every turn. It has so much stall potential and lets you just really dictate the flow of the game. Against faster, like aggressive decks, obviously, that's not as good because they'll just kill you before that matters. But when you're talking about like controlling the board, I think Salamander just buys you so much flexibility in how you play your turn out. Now the other thing, which I think is underlooked, and you brought up like the monk spirit can't block. True, it can't block. That is a problem. Against bear, it doesn't really matter because the monk can't block either. But it also can't be targeted by attacks. And it is insane that was printed on that card. Insane. Because there have been so many times where my monk spirit has been sitting there threatening a raptor hatchling or threatening a guard pressure or threatening whatever else, and they just can't do anything about it. Like, are you gonna spend a frog ping on a monk spirit? It already got its value. Are you gonna AoE early to try and get rid of this thing? Like, there's just no easy way to deal with it. Are you gonna spend Odette on it? Like, it's so obnoxious that you can't attack it. And it just sits there like a little missile waiting to hit whatever the heck you need it to hit.
It's
and I think
a defensive ability, and you pointed out a while back that Monk Spirit is actually a really interesting massive growth target.
Yeah, you can load it up with alterations, which is hilarious. Like, it obviously it still gets hit by spells, right? Like, you can be traded up by someone, and it'll be hard. I think it will be hard. What are you gonna do? Like, if you massive growth a Salamander Monk Spirit, you can't attack into it. What's your best answer to that? Like, ping fester? Like, what are you gonna do? And so I love it for that reason too. Like, I think it sits there and it's just sitting there as a threat. And yeah, it can't block, but they can't get rid of it. It's just gonna eventually target something, and there's nothing really much they can do about it. And since you already got good value out of that die, it's just icing, Yeah. So anyway, that's why I have it so high.
John did bring up a good point that Salamander does feel less great in the O2 meta, because you put out your Salamander, I put out my Cobra. You attack Salamander with the Cobra, I'm just gonna take the damage, so the Salamander doesn't die, and then I swing back, mill you a card, and deal that damage somewhere. I'm not gonna hit the Salamander, but I'll hit something else.
Yeah, and it is the best self-sack target too. That's another good point, John. It's just, for me, again, I think it's clear by my list that I rate flexibility pretty high, based on where I put Bear and where I put Salamander and Cobra and so on. Like, yeah. So
I love it. I crutch on it. I have a quick Salamander Monk story before we move on. This was during last season. It was a streamed game that I had against Asterisk. He was playing Brennan, and terrifyingly, because I was not expecting it at all, and I didn't first fight Fester, he stuck a Goron Rock Brawler heading into round 2. And so now I'm staring down this Brawler, right? And I go first, round 2, and I can immediately slam down Earthquake and ping the Brawler off and, like, just get rid of it, right? But I decide not to do that, which makes everybody, including Jesse and them, like, believe that I don't have the Earthquake. Or no, they could see my hand. It was a pre-recorded game. So they were wondering, like, why is he not playing the Earthquake? And it's because I tasted blood and I wanted more value out of my Salamanders. And so what I did instead was I used Turtle Guard just to kind of stall against that Brawler to make sure that it couldn't actually get through to face where it was going to really hurt. And then I started just
I summoned a Salamander Monk. I attacked with the first one. I attacked with the second one, and I got both of my monks exhausted to where I had gotten them already with some value, and that's when I pulled the trigger on Earthquake. I got rid of them. I got
Mhm.
the spirits, and at the end of that round, I was in absolutely firm control of the board
Yeah.
because I had gotten 4 pokes out of 2 dice with the Salamander Monks by holding back the AoE and letting it clear out those exhausted monks to make sure that I was getting max value. And like that sequence of play, like that it was worth it to delay a major removal spell because the extra value was so much upside. I think that says a lot about Salamander Monk.
Yeah. For sure.
The one thing I do wonder with salamanders are like how you get them to die to get that spirit out of the value. Because I feel like if you're attacking a unit, they get the choice to counter, so they typically
Mhm.
just not counter, so you don't get the spirit out. Even if that unit's going to die, you might still just not counter, so they don't get more value. In decks I've ran before, like with Xander, I had the Salamander Monk, and I knew I'd be running Earthquake with it, so it's like I attack with Salamander, Earthquake, get the spirit out, can attack there. I ran it in an Aerodel too, with Mindfog Owls, so that if they wanted to block the owl, they'd have to block the Salamander too, and
Yeah,
then it would end up dying, so then I get the spirit. Um,
that's sharp.
what
Yeah.
other ways do you typically use to make sure that they die and come back? Because that seems like, at least to me, the hard part of making that efficiency engine work.
Well, I'm gonna save my answer for my honorable mention.
Okay.
Maybe a hint of what's to come.
Revealing.
I do think
Okay.
you can do if you're in Brennan, you can Spirit Burn it, you can Blood Chains it, you can AoE is a big thing, like to clear it away. There are lots of different ways that you can utilize an exhausted Salamander Monk as a sacrifice target to get value. So I think there's that, but
Do you feel like you need a reliable way to sacrifice the monk to get the spirit out to make it worthwhile, or do you think it's fine just having it on its own?
I think it is just fine having it on its own, but I think it's worth considering. The thing is, I think that you will end up running another card in your list that does that for you just because it's a good card, like Nature's Wrath.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree.
Like you're gonna end
Completely.
up running something that will do that for you just because it's a good card that you're gonna be playing anyway. So I don't think that's really like a huge problem, at least in the decks that I've played. Like you generally have a way to do that. Um,
For sure.
so
And if my opponent lets me get like 3 or 4 pokes with a Salamander Monk because they just refuse to counter it and they don't want me to get a spirit, oh, okay, I got 4
yeah,
pokes from a single die. Thank you. Like,
I do
it's fine.
I do
Yeah,
think you
and it'll
do
probably
have to get it
eventually
killed.
die anyway.
I do think you have to get it killed, like because I think the true juice for that card is in the Monk's Spirit, that unkillable little punk.
Glowy, glowy
Yeah,
jerk.
but anyway, let's move on to our number ones, and we have all different number ones, which is really cool.
Ew.
Yeah, Phil, you want to kick us off with your number one conjuration in Ashes?
Better
Sure.
than Frostback Bear.
Better than Frostback Bear. My Aerodel in me is really showing with this one, but
Uh
my
huh.
number one
Uh-huh.
is Gilder. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No surprise.
so
I want to state for the record that Gilder at number 1 is in fact correct. So
so it was really tough for me, like where I wanted to put this, because I think I was also just being stubborn. I didn't want to put Frostback Bear number one, so it's like, well, Gilder is also just great value.
straight up.
So with Aerodel, yeah, you have the ping, then Water Blast there to take out a bear, other 3 life units with that. Um, the Inheritance giving a status token isn't really that useful in most builds, but it can start to be more useful as the time cycle grows with more status effects. Um, but you get an O2 body, which isn't like progressing any game plan much, like all the other units on my list are. They're more proactive. This is more just stabilization. Um, but having the unit guard is just so like feels so needed in a lot of decks. Just for like you guys were just saying with Salamander Monk, all of that guard pressure and stuff and poking. Like if you're going, Jason, like you were just saying, like if I let you keep a Salamander Monk alive, it's like if you hit like the Gilder twice, we're getting the same value out of that because you had to hit it twice for it to die, and then it's just sitting there, and then I just bring out another that you're going to just consistently have to hit. But then it can also just like protect other units. If you try to take down something else, the Gilder can come in, block your Salamander, and then since it doesn't have an attack, it's not going to counter back, not going to bring out your Spirit. But yeah, I just really like the unit guard that it has there, and then the ping on when it enters is just really strong for controlling the board and keeping all of your other units stable so they can achieve what you want them to do.
Yeah. The other day against Kaya, I sent a Salamander Monk to face, and he used the Gilder to block it. And I was like, that's kind of weird. You didn't kill my Salamander, and you don't get Unit Guard now. I was like, this is great. You don't have anything to Unit Guard my knight. Time to drop my knight. And then I dropped my knight,
Legends.
and then he blood chains the Gilder to double exhaust it. And I was like, oh,
It's,
okay.
yeah, we
Two,
were
two, two life, man. Two life.
we were just saying like Salamander Monk's great for self sack, but like I was thinking like Gilder, any other like O2s are great for that too, because they can
Mhm.
save you damage when something attacks, then it lives, and if they don't kill it with something else, then you can use blood chains or something
Yeah,
else
blood
to
chains
still
for
get
that double.
value back from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see why Gilder is so high, and honestly, like it's not even in my honorable mention, but it would have been my 6th. I'll just say that. It would have been my 6th.
it'll be your 7th.
Well, I don't know. Do you count the honorable mention as 6? Is that how that works?
I don't. That's not what I'm doing with mine for sure.
Okay,
My six
that-
would be Cobra for sure.
My
Yeah.
6th that ended up being my honorable mention.
Okay.
I didn't want to
Yeah.
do any hot take with that.
Yeah. For me,
Your
I
takes
think
are ice cold. Yeah.
I think the
I got nothing new here. Maybe with the Gilder up top, but that's
here
trying to push the envelope too much.
here's my thing with Gilder and why it's not on my list. I personally really don't like units that can't attack. I just really value the proactivity of being able to attack something. Now, Gilder can ping something.
I have attacked
But-
with Gilder before.
I know you can attack with Gilder, and there
No,
are there are
for
niche
good reasons.
situations. Yeah,
I've attacked with them with Mindfall Gals coming in so that they couldn't block the Mindfall Gals.
yeah,
So
For sure.
they have uses.
you
It's
can
a
do that.
main and a
You can
pinch.
you can also if for whatever reason your opponent decides to Lightbringer while you have a Gilder out, you can
Yeah.
use that. So yeah, there are uses for that. But it doesn't fight for the board in that way. It helps
I would say in
protect
that
yours,
sense.
but yeah.
With the Lightbringer, it definitely hurts when you have the Gilder and then you're forced, if that's your only unit, they Lightbringer that, they attack, you have to attack with it, and it's like,
Right.
just lost value there. So
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah.
that's definitely a huge negative there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
One other thing that I love about the Gilder is it's almost nil resiliency, because even if you have both of them out, you can still use the book to frog ping without actually using a frog. So you can get some of that damage in without having to actually meditate up, which
Mhm.
is really cool.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
that ability on the book rather than the Gilder coming
Right.
into play, it's just really nice there.
the other reason I didn't have it on my list is because it puts you in 2 colors. And for me, doing a top 5 conjurations, personally, I don't think I can put a 2 color unless, I put an Indigo Creeper. But like, again, I have to, disclaimer, say like the value ceiling for Indigo Creeper is just absurd. But like I don't like that Gilder puts you, even though it's like the two, probably indisputably the two best colors in the game right now. It does box you in a bit with deck building.
That's fair.
I do think as well that Gilder. I think Aerodel pushes Gilder over the edge, whereas it would normally Aerodel and Mayoni, like both.
Yeah, I was going to say Mayoni also
The-
to protect the
yeah.
snake is just phenomenal.
Those two push Gilder's ceiling and floor so much higher than every other Phoenixborn. Like you can run Gilder and Herald. It's good. It's not nearly as good as Aerodel or Mayoni. It just does so much for those decks, and they're both notably very, very strong decks in the meta.
Yeah.
I don't think it's because of Gilder. I think Gilder enables a lot for them. I think that those decks are strong, and Gilder's a big part of why. But I wouldn't say that like Gilder's like a top 5 conjuration for me personally, because that it is kind of like those are the two decks you see it in, for the most part. So
I tell you what, though, Jeremy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but personally, I wouldn't play your hot take number 4 without Gilder. I think
Indiglo
creepers
Creeper?
love Gilder.
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen a Koji Creeper deck without Gilder, so that's a
Yeah.
good point.
It's
so
true.
Good.
I don't like that the status token is you don't get to really pick when it goes off unless you south sack it, of course. But your opponent has a lot of
Gilder
control
goes,
over
yeah.
where that status token goes. I don't like that. But I can't deny
Yeah.
that it's really, really strong for the deck. Like it's I
Yeah.
will say
Gilder
I'll
is,
say this. When we were talking earlier about the hypothetical like creeper deck that doesn't build completely around creepers strategy, I wouldn't put Gilder in that hypothetical list, probably. I think it would end up being something
fair.
more akin to a fighting spirit type of thing. But we'll see.
Yeah.
And like with
Um,
Brennan too, like you might not want the Gilder, you might want just something else to keep up the aggro pressure, and then you have like it backed by creepers, so that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yep. Okay, my number 1 is Lightbringer. And yeah, it's funny too because like Jason, you have it at 4, and Phil, you don't have it on your list at all.
No.
Which
I
is wild to me.
Right.
So
I do want to say though that Lightbringer at number 1 is correct.
thank you. Thank you. Feel
Huh,
very
that's funny.
Definitely.
That sounds like something you said about my number 1.
No, it's Lightbringer for sure.
Yeah, for me like and it may just be the types of decks that I tend to play. I like to play kind of tempo oriented decks where you can overwhelm your opponent or like trick them into doing things that are not good for them or whatever. But I love Lightbringer because it's a 1-die exhaust with a 1/1 attached to it. That's so good. Like that alone is just so good. But it also like it dictates your opponent's lines of play. I personally value cards that do that very, very highly. If you're playing a card that the moment before you even play it, they're having to think about it and like they have to change what they're doing to deal with it. To me, that's a very strong effect. Because the moment you play Lightbringer Book, and really before that, because if they see you're on like 1 or 2 Divine, they'll probably suspect it. But you play Lightbringer Book down and they're like, oh, I have to play around Lightbringer now. Like that's annoying. It changes your whole the way you play your first 5 and everything. And yeah, I think there's really just, in my opinion, there's no other conjuration in the game that quite controls the pace of the game and dictates your opponent's decisions and opens them up to bad trades quite like Lightbringer does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
I
really hard
agree with that.
not putting Lightbringer on my list. Like I said, it was just a tough like list trying to put mine together. Like, but all of the other ones, like ultimately, were like, oh, all of these just bring great value for me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I agree with all your points. Like the way it dictates the game, like they really have to like play around that so they don't get screwed over.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't ran Lightbringer too much. It just feels like too much big brain for me, I guess, trying to be like, oh, I'm gonna get you with the Lightbringer. Um, but the few times I have played, it's like just really fun to be like, oh, I have this big amount of units out here. You have one blocker. What am I going to do? Oh, Lightbringer. Remove your blocker. Get my swing in. So that's
Yeah.
really nice to like remove blockers there too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll say I was super intimidated by Lightbringer when I first started playing. Like I only started using this Conjuration just a couple months ago. It was really in preparation for Shuffle Bus season 5, 5, 4. Which one did I play Noah in? Anyway, 5. It was in preparation for that I started exploring. Like I was like, I need to start playing this unit because I see people playing it all the time. I need to not be intimidated by it and start playing it. And the more I play with that unit, the more I just realize that it opens up so many lines of play, and it really enables a lot of it enables a lot of like tempo aggression strategies that don't work without it. It was, I think it's instrumental in my Herald deck that I took to Invitational. I think it just puts in so much work in that list. So anyway, that's my number one.
Lightbringer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that is correct. The thing about Lightbringer is that it is the best illusion card in the game, bar none.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that it pairs with that color so much. I mean, you're talking figures in the fog, getting a unit exhausted to shadows or false demon or something, shadow guard, like so
Rinse
much.
Fury.
That was good being on here tonight, guys.
Yeah.
I
John
love
says
Lightbringer.
he's asking, does the fact that it forces you to include Divine Dice hurt it? I don't think so,
No,
personally, because of Sonic Swordsman.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
sure.
what I thought with what is it too. Like
yeah.
Yeah.
if you're wanting to run Sonic Swordsman, it just fits perfectly there. And then you're in sympathy, so then you run Salamander with it too. So then you
Yeah,
just
and
just have
also
great cards
divine
there.
dice are basic. I think they're my second favorite dice to actually use as a dice power. Like boosting a unit is great. So,
Divine
it's so
Power is amazing on Salamander
great.
Monk Spirits.
It is. It so is. Yeah,
It's so good.
I love Lightbringer. I would go so far as to say I crutch on it. I've used it in every single Shuffle Bus deck until this season. And this season was the first one where I started 0-2. So Lightbringer, everybody.
Right.
Yeah, I love that card. I do think in a lot of ways it's the best conjuration in the game. I kind of don't leave home without it. I love it.
But now that you've lied to us, what is your number one conjuration in the game, Jason?
It's Three-Eyed Owl. That's the
Three-Eyed
number one
Owl.
conjuration in the game.
Yeah. You know what?
Uh,
As much as I hate agreeing, I have to agree with you on this, that I think I personally, it's not my number one. I think that there's a legitimate argument for it being number one. Just
Yeah.
because of how much it warps Ashes. Like,
it's a terrorist.
yeah.
And the thing about it is as you said many times, Jeremy, it's not just impacting the game, it's also impacting deck building in a major
Mhm.
way. And there's entire like game plans that right now just crumble to an owl because if what you're doing requires all 5 of those first 5 cards, but you don't have a good way to squeeze in an answer for owl,
Mhm.
those things don't work together. Like your deck doesn't work at that point because Owl is everywhere and it warps what you do. And it's one of those units that nothing trades well with. I think maybe the best thing you can do against it obviously Odette. But then at that point, that's your whole Phoenixborn ability. Just get rid of this stupid pink bird. And
Yeah.
who wants to do that? And then beyond that, I really like Ice Trap because they spent a card and they have a ready spell and they still technically got a card off you, but at least the freaking thing's dead. So you don't have to deal with like 2 owls next round.
Mhm.
So I quite like Ice Trap. And then actually my favorite answer for 3-eyed owl, it doesn't always work out, but if you go first, it almost always does, is old Lightbringer.
Mhm.
Lightbringer is a great answer to owl. I've used it that way a lot. And the thing is they can play around it by getting another unit out before owl. But if they're taking the time to do that, then you can probably get your whole hand out. And so I think Lightbringer is a really great answer to
Mhm.
3-eyed owl.
A
This
funny
this
story
Go ahead.
with Lightbringer as an answer to Owl. I was playing Matt Bowers before in the AIL. I drop Owl, he drops Lightbringer. I summon Owl, and he's like, "Uh-oh, do you have Light Swordsman in your hand?" I was like, "Maybe." He puts out the Lightbringer. I drop the Swordsman to uh to get the swing in, and then the Owl, since it didn't have to attack there, takes out one of his first 5 cards, which he was hoping Lightbringer would protect against. So
Nice.
Wow, nice light swordsman tech there, buddy.
Yeah.
it was
How does it feel to ruin people's days and make their deck
helpful.
irrelevant? It's
Yeah.
good. If
Just
you
3 Owl
feel
coming in great there.
Yeah, listen, I play Owl sometimes because I find it competitively necessary, but I want to state for the record that if you actually like this unit, you're a monster. So this thing, hate this card. There's been a
Yeah.
lot of talk lately
Fair.
about the possibility of it being chained one day. That's something I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I think it's a conversation worth having. The reason that I've ranked it number one is that I think I truly think it warps the game of Ashes. In some ways, I think that could be a good thing. But in a lot of ways, I feel like maybe it's not a good thing sometimes. And so whichever way you fall on that, when you build a deck and when you fire up a game of Ashes, you have to think about Al. You just have to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So we've made it through the lists. Let's talk about our honorable mentions, and then we'll wrap things up because we've been going for a while here. So,
Yeah,
Start with
go
Phil's
to the
lame
log.
one.
Phil, what's your
Yeah.
honorable mention?
Mine, like I was just saying, was just my 6th, so that's just Lightbringer.
Mhm.
Came close to getting on the list, but I just couldn't take out anything else on there. We were just
Yeah.
talking about how great Lightbringer is, and if we made like a longer list, it obviously would have made it, but I just couldn't get it in how tight the 5 were.
I've seen a couple of times your exact 6 here. 3-8 Owl, Salamander Monk, Ruby Cobra, Frostback Bear, Gilder Lightbringer. I've seen people specifically cite those 6 as being like the big ones.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with that.
And that might mean I might just be like too much in the group think of everything, like, oh, these are the top 6, not even going to think about anything else. But I did like when I went through this, like, okay, what others could I put on my list? And I just
Yeah.
couldn't find anything else that was
Yeah.
a sure thing. Like, let's slot that in.
Mhm.
Yep. And like we didn't do this, so I guess we'll do it now just because it's on my mind. I don't want to forget, but like cards that showed up on all 3 of our lists is an interesting thing. I think Salamander Monk showed up on all 3.
Yep.
Frostback Bear showed up on all 3. And is that
That's
it?
it.
That's
That's
it.
it.
Yeah.
So Frostback Bear and Salamander Monk are the only ones that we all 3 say are in the top 5.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My honorable mention, John called it earlier, is False Demon. It's kind of crazy. I think this one I do think is kind of a hot take. Like I actually do think that Indigo Creeper is like a legitimate thing. It's not just I just threw that in there because I thought it'd be funny. Although I do like to play devil's advocate quite a lot. But False Demon, I think it's a pet card of mine. I do think it's very, very good. I think it's way underrated. Um, like being that's what I was saying earlier was being able to like kill off your monk spirits, your exhausted monk spirits with it is really, really strong actually. Because they'll try to strand them. They'll try to get that value away from you, and then you can like False Demon kill something. The self-sack capability of False Demon is super underrated because a lot of times people say, well, you know, it only comes in at the end of the round, so it doesn't matter. And there's a tendency for Ashes players to think about the current round as like this box that you're in, and like you don't really think ahead of it. I think False Demon is really good at setting up big swings for the next turn. It's good at enabling the type of decks like I like to play, which I think my Herald deck, I think it puts in a lot of work there. That kind of tempo swarm thing. But it is good for the current round too. You can kill off, and it, you know, if you're out of Lightbringers, you've used them both. You know, that's a real strategy. Let your opponent summon 2 Lightbringers and then don't kill them and they can't summon anymore.
Yep.
Stalling that book. Well, False Demon opens that up. So yeah, I think there's a lot to it. It can set up Festers, it can, you know, open up blockers, it can get rid of hatchlings, which is really, really good. For a 2/2 to come down, threaten some damage, survive, stick around, and be able to kill a hatchling, and then it blocks bear next turn. Yeah, or yeah, it's really, really good. I think super underrated, and it's a basic sync too, which I love.
Your
we can't get enough of those.
Your creeper hot take, I totally get it, and I think the math on creeper and the ceiling is very, very good. But I couldn't fully get on board with having that on like a top 5 list of conjurations, as much as I agree with all your points about it. Demon though, every time somebody in the Ashes Discord says that False Demon is bad, an angel loses their wings. And I so agree with you that this is a straight up good unit. You know, Phil just put Gilder as his number 1. Gilder does a point of damage when it comes in. The first Gilder costs 2 dice. You know what else costs 2 dice and does a point of damage when it comes in? False Demon does. And just because it has to go on an exhausted unit, that does not mean that point of damage doesn't matter. It is still exceptional value to get a point of damage when the 2/2 comes into play. And not only that, but the basic sync, there's no book tax. I think False Demon is genuinely great. I don't think this take is hot. I really wish the community would see it more for what it is. I think it's a really good card.
That said, I didn't put it in my top 5 for a reason. I think it's
you're a
not
coward.
quite there. But it is my honorable mention. What's your honorable mention, Jason?
Just real quick, so we don't go past it. John asked if we considered Silver Snake, Raptor Hatchling, or Sleeping Widow. We all didn't put uniques in there, so that cut Silver Snake, and I also just didn't really consider Hatchling or Widows either. I just was looking at like summon books. I don't know about you guys when you were making it. Did you look at books or just did you look at them?
Yeah, to me, Hatchling is more a part of an ally thing because of the way it comes in. I don't consider it an isolation as a top 5 conjuration. Sleeping Widow is, I think there's an argument for saying Sleeping Widow actually. But
the way that it comes into
I was
play
thinking books. I wasn't thinking about.
Yeah, I was thinking books too. I do think you can make an argument for that. Sleeping Widow is a hugely warping card, and it's very powerful.
Is Sleeping Widow a reaction? Is it a burn spell? Is it a conjuration? What the heck is this card?
Yeah, it's 4/2 in stats for 2 dice.
It's good. That's what it is. Yeah. So my honorable mention is not my number 6. Like I said, that would be Ruby Cobra. I kind of took this question more as like, what do I think is flying under the radar? And it's the old Turtle Guard. It's 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 so freaking good. It's so good. And Jeremy and I've talked about Turtle Guard a lot. In fact, I was telling him the other day, like, hey, I have a new Xander deck, and this one felt really, really good, like better than a Xander deck that I've had in a while. And he was like, yeah, that's because you're not running Turtle Guard. And I was like, listen here, like you leave me alone. Like I love my turtles. Nothing trades with turtle. Nothing trades with turtle. It is 2-3 for 1 dice after round 1, and honestly, a 2-3 for 2 dice, even with the book tax, is fine. I totally hear what Jeremy's saying because he's like, you can't attack with it, therefore it can't win you the game. But when you put turtle down, it means that you don't have to play cautiously with the rest of your units because the opponent is going to have to do something significant to get that turtle off the board, and whatever they would spend to do it is something that they're not spending to get rid of a bear or try to set up a night kill or something like that. And so just the fact that you can summon turtle and have him sit there and know that your back end is covered so that you can go make pokes and be aggressive with everything else that you have on the board, I think is the real secret sauce to Turtle. And then also having it maintain a defensive presence round over round with that withdraw ability, I think also has just a lot of value because it's very hard if they're not actively trying to specifically remove turtle. You can just use it to make a good block at a good time, and you have almost virtual certainty that that turtle is going to make it through to the next round. So even if something goes wrong, if your opponent has top of round swing, there's your turtles ready to stop some damage coming in. They block bear for 1 die. I think, and honestly, this is the big one for me on turtle, is it's a 1 die consistent answer to bear. That's great. Like if I don't have to really worry about my opponent's bears, I think I'm doing pretty good. And so it doesn't win you the game.
You know what
It
else
does
is a 1 die consistent answer to bear?
Don't do
Noah.
it. Don't do it. Don't you dare.
Noah, best conjuration in the game.
Is every other round a consistent answer to bear?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good way. Thank you.
I don't know.
I don't know, man.
I don't know either. But that's the end of our list. We went through them all.
Nobody's gonna argue with me about turtle. Okay, fine. You know what?
I like
right.
turtle. Jeremy doesn't, because I know like he was already saying he didn't like Gilder because it's not a good attacker. Turtle can't even attack.
Yeah,
but I do like it as that blocker against like bear to be like, now you have to deal with it. If I'm Airedale, I'm taking out that, and then if you drop a bear, then I can't deal with the bear. So it is good value, like defensive value.
When we played in Shovel Bus and I was on Echo and I had Turtle Guard, you were just spending Gilder Water Blast on my turtle every single round because you had looked at my list and you were like, yep, this is the thing I can't deal with and my bears need to get through. So I got to spend 2 dice on turtle every round. And like you were forced to do that, even though it was technically an inefficient dice trade, but you had no other good answer. And, props to you for understanding that that's what you had to do. But Turtle beat you on the math. I didn't win the game, but I beat you on math. So yeah,
I think the reason
definitely wins on math.
I think the reason I don't feel threatened by turtle ever is because I play crescendo in like every list and just crescendo it. And I've tried playing with turtle before, and I just cannot grok that it can't attack. I just can't do it. It doesn't contribute to your win condition. It preserves what you have. It blocks really well. It's efficient, but it's not speeding up the game clock for you at all. Like for me, I think about that in terms, and that's usually that's not talked about a lot in Ashes. It's talked about in Magic a lot, but like speeding up your opponent's end game clock is the definition of tempo, and turtle is negative tempo. It doesn't. Yeah. It sits there. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't it fights for the board passively, but your opponent has a lot of control over how that happens, and I just don't like it personally. I get the efficiency 100%, but I hate that unit so much. I hate it.
Totally fair.
It is in my opinion. I would rank it if we did a bottom 5 at some point. It would be there.
Sheesh. Wow. I was thinking you were about to say that you'd put it on the list of most overrated units, but bottom 5, man.
I mean, well, now I'm remembering like Admonisher and
Yeah, and
you
Biter.
know,
Yeah, I was
Biter.
gonna say Biter.
Biter?
You did say top 5.
Don't defend Biter. Don't you start. It is too late for you to start defending Biter. We're out of time. Everybody.
That's
Hey,
true. It
that's
is
the show,
getting late.
everybody.
Well, okay, guys, that was a lot of fun.
Yes,
Um,
thanks for having me on again.
yeah, thanks for being here, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
Impossible German, everyone. He's got a blog. I don't know the link to it off the top of my head. Do you know?
And frankly, neither do I.
Oh, that's fun.
So,
We'll
yeah.
you know, we'll post that
Self-promotion
later.
It's not my strong suit. I don't know how to tell you to help me out.
All of his stuff is linked in the Ashes Discord. If you want to join the Ashes community Discord, you can find links to his articles there. He's got lots of good stuff. He's got the adventuring party decks, which are really, really good if you're wanting to like kind of dip your toes into constructed Ashes without having to worry about deck building right away. That's, in my opinion, it's the way to go. Better than the recons, better than precons, better than whatever. I would grab those.
You have
Yeah.
articles, you have starter decks, but you just never have any earthquakes.
Yep. Don't go to him for earthquakes, guys.
How long
Or
have you been sitting on
check
that
his
one, Phil?
discard pile.
Just
Check his discard
a
pile.
couple
Yeah.
minutes.
You, I really have loved this podcast, everybody, and I encourage everybody who watches this back or is watching now just to keep tuning in, especially next week. Next week is going to be a big podcast for these guys. They have an exclusive spoiler that they're going to do. It's called Butt Spirit, and I think
Oh.
you guys are going to be really excited.
Butts.
Really
yeah.
wondered where you were going with
I
that.
was
Butt
like,
Spirit.
I was like, Phil, did I miss something?
Yeah, and I was like, did you get it and not tell me?
Yeah.
Tune in next week for the exclusive coverage of Butt Spirit. It promises to
Spirit.
really change the butt meta. It's gonna be great.
Yep.
So I need to go to bed.
As long as it's not rooted. Okay. Guys, thank you, guys and gals, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, first 5 Fridays every week, 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Ashes Discord. Come find some games.
First five league.
First 5
is a good
league
thing.
as well. If you can't make it to Friday, you can't make it to the Friday night game, but you still want to get an opponent matched up with you. First 5 leagues got you covered. There are tournaments happening. There's shuffle bus qualifiers. There's draft tournaments. There's all kinds of cool stuff happening. TC League is happening as well. There's a lot of stuff, and Ashes is only beginning. We've got spoilers on the way, which we'll talk about when the set is fully revealed, so stay tuned for that. I think that's it. You got anything else, Phil?
No, I think that was great.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
See
Bye,
ya.
guys.
All right, it's done.